Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Maxime from Roots of Impact. Roots of Impact started with the mission to fill the financing gap of social enterprises through innovative financing instruments and structure. By doing that, we allow different types of capital players to participate while at the same time focusing on impact creation through social enterprises. At the same time, Roots of Impact is also a social enterprise ourselves, and we also raise impact capital that link financial terms to the impact that we create. So I've seen it firsthand how linking financial incentives with impact is actually possible, but also it can be simple and practical. So as you might imagine, the topic of today's panel, scaling social impact and setting the groundwork for social finance, is really close to my heart. At the same time, as we heard many times today, apart from innovating how financial instruments can be structured, can be one way of scaling impact. But given the fact that, well, we feel that like the funding cut in the US, in the Europe, also very substantially here. So one key to the situation is also how we can mobilize different types of capital to be deployed to scale impact. And I think we're very honored to be here today to have such an exceptional panelist to share the different perspective of social finance. So thanks a lot, Yaya-san, Hasanah, for inviting me here today to moderate this panel, but also to practice listening to the different perspective that is also very relevant to social finance. To anchor the theme of the forum this year, philanthropy that listens, maybe I will start with you, Professor Azmi. What does listening mean to you when it comes to social finance?
Okay. Thank you very much, Maxine. First, let me thank Yayasan Hasanah for inviting me to be one of the panel members here this afternoon. Just an introduction, my name is Azmi. I'm the president of a university, INCEIF University, a university established by Central Bank of Malaysia, Bank Negara Malaysia. Before I joined INCEIF as its president, I worked in Islamic Development Bank, helping member countries of Islamic Development Bank to implement Islamic finance. I've been working in Islamic finance for the last 40 years. So Islamic finance, Islamic social finance. So your question about listening for social enterprises. See, Islamic social finance, which is a term which I can claim that I invented the term in 2014, because prior to that it was just a social finance. The idea of Islamic social finance is to listen to the needs of the social enterprises. What kind of requirements they have, and then from there develop solutions, because we know that solutions can be, not everything can be done by banks. There are other solutions out there, and we are going to discuss next, is to look at the kind of solutions for social enterprises. Because as mentioned by the earlier speakers, they are operating in the third sector. So meaning that we can't just simply use the banking solutions or the corporate instruments for social finance, social enterprises. Obviously, as they grow and progress, we can look at different kind of instruments to support them. I will start at that.
Thank you so much. I'm glad that you brought up that you would always listen to the stakeholder, which is social entrepreneur here. And very fortunately today, we also have a social entrepreneur on this panel. So Sooinn, may I pass the question to you? What does listening mean to you, and especially when it comes to the topic of social finance?
What an honor to sit in here in front of all those great people. Thank you, Yayasan Hasanah. So I'm CEO and co-founder of Enuma, an education technology startup that is also mission-driven. So our mission is to support all learners, including those with special needs, to be independent learners. So we are building solutions to help all learners actually learn the very basic level of education for basic reading, writing, and do math. we have two businesses. One is B2C business. So we are serving children in Japan, China, or Korea whose families just want to prepare their children for academic skills as early as possible. So it is quite good business. But at the same time, we are serving to B2G market. We call it impact business sometimes when it doesn't provide any meaningful revenue, because our goal is become part of public education system. So there is so many failure in public education system, and some of those problems actually can be supported with a digital tool that provide individualized education that fit to each children's level regardless of their background in home. So for meaning of listening, because we want to become part of the system, we have to learn a lot of things, especially from the policymakers and school systems and teachers who are stakeholders and who will invite us to be a part of the system. It's a long journey. We start to listen, but we just make so many we lost so many clues on the way, so it's a kind of trial and error on the way. But by listening, by understanding, I hope that one day we can become a real collaborator of the large system.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sooinn. Now I would like to move on to you, Yoshi.
Yep.
A lot of us know what a unicorn is, but at the same time, you've been advocating for the concept of zebra and play a very important role in integrating this concept in the impact economy in Japan. Maybe you can explain what zebra means. Is there a definition?
Well, first of all, I want to thank Yes and Hasanah. Just a little bit of a relationship, my relationship with Yes and Hasanah. I met City, the managing director of Yes and Hasanah, last year in Tokyo, and we agreed a lot of things. We realized we have a lot in common. So I got invited here. I really appreciate this opportunity. So for the definition of zebra, we actually intentionally we don't have a definition of zebra. We have characteristics of zebra, which I could explain later on. If you ask me if there is a definition, there's no definition of zebra.
Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more why you think it's more suitable to name it with characteristics rather than definition?
Sure. Can I maybe just explain a little bit about how the concept is, what the concept is?
Yes, please.
Probably a lot of people are not familiar with. So zebra comes from my problem awareness through my impact investing career. I've been in the impact investing career for decades. And especially when I started, everybody was looking for impact unicorn, right? So which means basically you go exponential growth, and you also make an impact. And a lot of times in impact investing, in the beginning especially, a lot of people are coming from the VC background or the investment fund background. So they are thinking about applying what they did for entrepreneurs for social entrepreneurs. Then everything will work out. Right? But if you think about it, the unicorns or exponential growth, say like in 5 years you go for an IPO, there's very rare cases. And there's a lot more companies that makes profit, still grow, maybe not exponential, but still grow, and create a social impact. So we call these companies zebra, kind of against unicorn. Unicorn is an illusional animal, but the zebra is a real animal. And then also zebra makes a group, right? So mutualism is one of the very important concepts. Having said that, the reason I said we don't have a definition is because having no clear definition of zebra creates actually a lot of argument for the people to think about. So people have an ownership about this concept. You will ask, so what does zebra mean to me? What does this zebra concept mean to my company? So it creates a movement. So movement is one key concept for what we have done as the groundwork for the social finance in Japan. So that's a little bit of a story. We have characteristics, which is, of course, the social impact is one of the characteristics. Long-term view, multi-stakeholder view is another characteristics. Challenging complicated social problem is another one. And then you have a vision to share with others. We have these 4 characteristics, but not the definition like you have to have this amount of sales, you have to have a disproportionate of women employees or things like that. So.
Perfect, thanks a lot. So basically, the reason why there's no definition is because you want to also create room for flexibility and also innovation along the way as the zebra community grows, right? Maybe now I turn to Sooinn to share a little bit more about your journey as an impact entrepreneur, but also to raise impact capital. You have a fantastic track record of raising very different types of impact capital. Maybe you can share a little bit more about what are the type of impact capital that you have raised so far, and also what are the roles of these capital at the different stage of growth of Enuma.
Just I learned that I'm one of the zebra with Yoshi's definition.
I'm happy. Together.
So, so we started in Silicon Valley as a venture-backed social enterprise. At that time, there was no term social enterprise. I just wanted to build software for children with special needs. So it's not very popular among typical Silicon Valley VCs. So the seed investment was mostly come from angels or education-oriented investors. However, so far we raised to $22 million US dollar. How can I say, equity capital, and also we receive about near to $10 million of non-stringed fund so far for last 13 years of journey. With the seed fund, we just built a software, and it actually became quite a big global hit. And after it became global hit, financial investors approached us and raised our Series A. But at that time, our problem is we design it for children with special needs, but in reality, more than millions of people download it for their smart learners in wealthy families. And actually, we realize that we are creating the gap of the society rather than closing the gap. That problem is not a problem for other business people, but it was very big issue for mission-driven startup like us. And then we enter the Global Learning X Prize as we learn it. So there was a 5 years of competition that is run by UNESCO and World Food Program with a $15 million US dollar prize from Elon Musk. They wanted to know if a tablet software only can teach illiterate students in rural area can learn how to read or write or do math without any reading adults' help. So after entering that competition, our Series A investor actually didn't like that idea. They think it's a waste of time to build something for children in rural area in Tanzania. So that's where we start to look around for other type of fund, like grant fund from Koika and the impact fund. At the time, we were very fortunate because it was a beginning of Korean impact fund movement that was mostly led by the government. So for our dream, group of impact investors actually raised the impact round for us to win the Global Learning X Prize to prove this concept to the world. After we became co-winner of Global Learning X Prize, we got $5 million cash directly come to our bank. That was sweetest part of all those story. But after that, we also had to raise another fund because we spent actually most of those money upfront to win the competition. Still, it was impact investors who really liked that idea and wanted us to scale. So we raised our Series B from mixture of impact investors in Korea and some of the financial investors. But at the same time, we actually divided our company's business into two different directions. One is B2C business that will make us sustainable, and another is impact business, we call it, to really create a systemic change with what we just proved and what we can do to the world. So to do that impact world, we promised to our investors we will search another type of capital and grant funding. We got a continuous grant funding from KOICA, and we are working with private foundations to enter a new country or to serve really marginalized community like refugee camps or deaf community in Tanzania or the immigrant families in Korea and so on. So it was quite a creative journey because we are still struggling to balance between our B2C business that is not enough to invest to our impact B2G business, and also, but we believe that there is a big opportunity in the future and continuously raise a fund from private investors, as well as we are searching for the grant and other alternative capitals to just achieve what we can do in the world.
This is really fantastic because you cover a really wide range of impact capital from ground, impact investor capital, as well as traditional equity. And I think it also anchors a lot to earlier messages, for example, from Temasek Foundation, how they see philanthropic capital can be catalytic at the seed stage. Also later on, for example, at certain pivotal points, or for example, when a social entrepreneur enter a new market or wanted to pilot like a certain new solution where there's a high risk, that's where grant capital or catalytic capital could come in and serve very effectively to bridge the gap. And on that point, Yoshi, I also know that you work with the government in Japan, as well as the private sector, to also kind of want to bridge this gap between the financial expectation, at the same time, the impact mission of zebras. Yep. Would you like to share a little bit more about your experience on that?
Sure. So Zebras and Company is my company. My company does a lot of things. Originally, I was thinking of creating maybe an impact fund or something to be an investor. But in the end, what we're doing is creating more about the ecosystem. So we do a lot of things. So we do investment, we do advisory work, we do advocacy with the government. We do kind of academic research work as well. And so what we achieved was basically in the second year, in 2023, the Japanese government, the previous Prime Minister Kishida, he decided to take this concept into one of the vital policy in Japan. Because this is a vital policy, all the ministries actually take a look at this policy to make their original policies. So in 2024, what happened was Ministry of Economy. We were working with the Ministry of Economy, and then we created the branch concept of zebra. It's called a local zebra, which is basically the government trying to create an ecosystem in each region in Japan around zebra companies. So that was another thing that happened. The interesting thing is actually the concept itself was created in the US originally. I brought it from the US to Japan, and I made a translated word, and I started spreading the concept. So what we have done actually so far is, I would say three things, right? I think the previous panel there was a similar conversation. So what we have done is One is shifting people's mindset and creating a movement with the concept, strong concept of zebra. We have a very strong PR marketing because my co-founder is coming from that area. So we have our own media. We actually partner with a lot of media in Japan as well. So we spread the word to more community, ordinary people. This is the one thing. Two, we create the real examples in businesses. This is our investment. We also do a lot of advisory work. Combining these two, I think we have supported more than 50 companies in Japan. So people actually see the concept, they understand the concept, and then they have, they resonated to the concept. And with the real examples, actually, they can more deeply understand about what it is. And the third one is the government. The government means to us is to create a more system, right, or a social system. So shifting the people's mindset, providing a real examples, and then now we are trying to make it as a real system in the society. That's part of the reason we work with the Ministry of Economy for this work, also Cabinet Office, and actually this year, 4 other ministries are joining, Ministry of Environment, Land and Infrastructure, Agriculture, and then also Finance. So this has been done so far, and we've been of course we invested, and there have been more mobilizing capital for zebra companies, but because of this groundwork we have done, it's actually another time to move more capital in Japan for zebra companies. I've been talking with a lot of regional banks, for example, and then also big corporations. A lot of institutions actually now about to start financing zebra companies.
I think it's also very interesting because in some of our conversation you also mentioned it's also about translating and reframing what we understood as risk for deploying capital for zebra. So it's also about applying a new lens to understand the potential impact, which is the value that zebra is creating, and then therefore assessing the risk from a different perspective. But now, at this point, because we talk about engaging other types of stakeholders in the community, I would like to turn to Professor Azmi, because the Islamic finance community would be also very relevant, especially in Malaysia. And so we have observed that Islamic finance has evolved quite a bit from individual giving to more large-scale investment or instruments like Waqf and Sukuk. And it would be interesting to hear from you how this transition actually unlocked new ways to finance social impact in Malaysia, but maybe also in other countries like Indonesia and the Gulf states.
Okay, thank you very much. You see, if you trace the development of Islamic finance, it started in the 70s, the modern Islamic finance started in the 70s, and right until today, I think the focus was mainly coming from the banking sector, from the insurance or what we call takaful, and then the capital market, suku, then Islamic funds, the equity market. I think for the last 10 years, we have been promoting another component of Islamic finance, what we call Islamic social finance. For those who do not know, Islamic social finance is an umbrella term that covers zakat. Zakat is a religious obligation based on income and asset, where you have to pay a certain percentage every year. So that is the zakat component. And then we have the wakaf component, which is similar to endowment. And then we have interest-free loan called Qardu Hasan. And then we have the donation, which is the sadaqah, we call. These are the components of Islamic social finance. People tend to think that these are all religious instruments, nothing to do to support either social enterprises or commercial. But that is wrong view altogether. We see more and more the role of Islamic social finance being promoted and used to support social enterprises to support the micro, the small, and the medium enterprises. And I can give you a lot of examples, both in Malaysia, in Indonesia, where I do a lot of work there as well, and in the Middle East. You know, one example that is very, very successful in Malaysia, which is currently implemented by Islamic banks in Malaysia, is the iTekat program created by Bank Negara, and this is coming out during the COVID times, because many people were unemployed, they need to create jobs. So how Bank Negara came on board is using Islamic social finance. You know, the micros and the small and medium enterprises, these are the B40s, what we call them. They need support. So using that philanthropic capital of zakat, and zakat can be used, say for example, yes, micro entrepreneurs, you require to buy equipments. Those equipments can be funded by zakat. Or you require capacity building. Those can be funded by zakat as well. You know, but we tend to think, zakat is religious, nothing to do with us. And this is the wrong notion, wrong thinking altogether. So that's why we should be looking at the Islamic social finance, zakat, wakaf, as powerful economic instruments to address those issues. And these are some of the issues that you raised this morning and this afternoon. And this is part of what we are doing now, engaging with different sectors to promote this. So one example, as I said, is the iTekat program. So much so that neighboring countries are coming to Malaysia to learn how we are doing this, utilizing the zakat for iTekat. So that's one example. The other example coming to, we have also banks in Malaysia like Bank Islam using Sadaqah House. Again, I wouldn't have the time to explain, but I want to go to another country, which is Indonesia. Indonesia used a different model. They use suku. Suku is basically the equivalent of bonds. They use suku, but what is interesting is they created as a cash wakaf linked suku. So basically using capital market instruments to create wakaf, and then the proceeds or the coupon of that suku is used to fund all the social enterprises for education, for health, for even green energy in rural areas. So that's another example, you know, using suku capital market instrument for social enterprises. That's in Indonesia. Then we go to Middle East. Even in UAE, they have created what they call a suku al-wakaf, where the government encourages not only individuals but also corporates to buy this suku. So when we say we buy suku al-wakaf, basically we are giving our philanthropic capital, and that money is used to fund social enterprise projects. So just imagine, from a religious instrument, now you are creating an economic instrument to address all those issues. That's in UAE. Saudi, the same thing. They have what we call the Wakaf Investment Fund, a big fund. This is what we call the cash wakaf, for the purpose of, again, the proceeds are for specific, to address, for example, the young mothers without having what they call it, housing. Because if you know, in Middle East, when you get married for young people, the male has to prepare everything to equip the house fully. And not in Malaysia, we are lucky. So to do that, there are NGOs that are providing. And the funding comes partly from the Wakaf Investment Fund. So, you know, that's how creative they have become. Similarly, in Malaysia, we have to be creative to address those issues. And I could go and on talking about those examples, but I think suffice to say that, given the limited time, it's a matter of how we think, we create innovative solutions using the Islamic social finance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So if I understood correctly, there are different types of role that Islamic finance could play even within the realm of social finance. First of all, for example, you can use it as a catalytic capital. At the same time, it can also be understood as patient capital, even though certain social innovation has kicked off, but also require a longer period of time to build economic viability. That's what I understood. Fantastic. But then speaking of which, now that we understand more about like the different role that Islamic finance could play in social finance, the question is priorities, because there are many different priorities as well nowadays, including humanitarian relief that require more immediate response. So how can we balance the fact that we are able to address immediate relief, for example, towards humanitarian crisis, while at the same time ensuring that there is enough resources that are being allocated to more long-term systemic level impact creation, for example, by financing social enterprises?
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, we tend to think Islamic social finance and Islamic finance in a silo. Banking, capital market, they are not connected. I think the idea is what we should be thinking is to look as the continuum. A continuum in the sense that from A to Z. Let me begin by as an example. We know that, for example, if there's any disaster, and Malaysia is prone to floods, not earthquake, prone to floods. The idea has always been, okay, how do you help those people who are affected by floods? Then we use zakat. That is for the immediate thing. But we should also be thinking of how do we prevent those flood victims. Again, we can use zakat instruments for flood prevention rather than just reactive to floods and then using zakat to support them. So that's one continuum. Another continuum is that as we go along, they require certain assets. Those assets can be funded either zakat or the wakaf. Okay? Then if we take in the case of the social enterprises which are involved in small and medium enterprises, or micro and small and medium enterprises, we can have what we call a breakdown in the context of whether they are unbankable or whether they are bankable. Again, providing different types of Islamic social finance solutions for them using a combination of sadaqah, zakat, wakaf. You know, those things. And then once they are bankable, then we have the Islamic finance component. And that Islamic finance component can also include Qadha Hasan, where, for example, Bank Islam in Malaysia is using the interest-free loan. You get a loan where you only pay the principal back without any interest or any profit margin. So that component is also brought into the picture. And then finally, of course, the commercial return expected from the commercial financing. So we have that range of instruments that are available. The key thing now is, as I said, from the Islamic social finance is to bring them into the economic sphere as an economic instruments. And I'm glad that, for example, in Malaysia, I think there is a strong move towards that. But in a number of countries like Indonesia, this is already being implemented. My involvement in this area, I would say that zakat management in Malaysia is very strong. I'll give you an example. Collection of zakat in Kuala Lumpur, where we are now, amounts to roughly, annual collection now, amounts to roughly 400 million US dollars. Yeah, I mean, significant amount, about 1.2 billion ringgit in terms of zakat collection. Just imagine how powerful it is if you use it properly through proper governance standards. So that's an example. If you combine the whole of Malaysia, it's much more significant. But wakaf, Malaysia is not as strong as Indonesia. So those are the things that we need to identify the gaps and address that. And work is been going on. For example, in my university, we have a dedicated center looking at those issues and providing solutions to that. So we're working with the religious authorities. And of course, working with religious authorities also require us to work with the higher level of religious authority, which is the Majlis Agama or state religious authority, to provide solutions to that. That's it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I think it was a very powerful number that you were sharing earlier about the amount of Islamic finance simply in KL here, how much we can unlock with that capital. But again, back to our very first question, which is, well, how can we use these capital very effectively from the perspective of also the end users, in this case, the social entrepreneur. So Sooinn, I would like to get back to you. Since you have experience raising different types of impact capital, is there any particular financial instrument or terms that was particularly helpful for you as a mission-driven entrepreneur and support you to balance both the financial ambition as well as the impact goal that you have at Enuma?
So I love our impact investors because there is two pillars of impact investment nowadays. So they want to look for the same level of financial return, but at the same time, they are caring about what impact we are creating in the world. So it's very helpful to actually pursue those two rabbits at the same time as an entrepreneur in this very complicated world. However, what I am still trying to figure out is most of impact investment actually using the same Silicon Valley term. So to get the return, they need to exit this company, right? To liquidate this company. So for us, there are not many options. Selling our company to other company, there is not many impact unicorn who will actually build our impact to the higher ground. It will be mostly other just a general education company that is not aligned with us, but just want to have our tech. Or just grow, deal really high to just make an IPO on our own. That's another very, very big goal. And sometimes it's difficult to balance between what we want to create as a mission to what we can do with all those technology and employee in our hand. So I am still having some nightmare that somebody just come there, whether they are impact investor or just financial investor, hey, Sooinn, it's a time to exit. You know what I mean? When we are not ready, right? When we are not agreeing with, is this the best way to create our impact continuously meaningful in the world? So that's the, yep. I believe that this issue is actually happening in impact ecosystem, and we just try to figure out so far.
That's why you need the zebra investors.
I'd like to elaborate a little bit more on your experience on that point.
Yeah, so just like she said, if you make a fund, there's always a fund life, right? Usually it's 10 years. It's somehow it's a world standard. Then usually in the investment for investors, you need like sourcing term for maybe like 2-3 years in the beginning, and then you need an exit term for maybe like 2 years in the last. So the remaining time is only 5 years. That's why for each company you have, they require you to exit in 5 years. What we have done is I create, so in the end, I didn't create, technically speaking, we didn't create a fund. So we don't have a fund, we don't have a fund life. We invest from our balance sheet. So it's a principal investment, which means we can provide actually permanent capital. So, so it's not the reason for the fund side to exit, but we can reason, we can exit when the company is ready or when the market is ready. So that's one thing. Another thing I'm thinking about is private credit, right? There's actually a lot of different types of needs for zebra companies. It's not only an equity, risk capital. In the beginning, maybe you need a risk capital. That's what we provide, patient capital, longer term capital. Then as you grow, you need working capital, you need maybe bridge finance. There's a lot of different needs. And actually, at least in Japan, the traditional financial institutions cannot meet this need because maybe you're too young, you don't have a credit. So even if you are, you have a good business, you have a very bright future, whatever it is, it's really hard for them to raise this type of capital too. So I'm trying to kind of set up the financial instruments. Also, that's why I've been talking with lots of regional banks, so that if I can change them to see the companies, the risk, the company's risk, and then if they can see the lens of the zebra, you can actually de-risk from a different way, so that they can also provide the what do you call it, mezzanine or private credit. Yep, back to you.
Fantastic. I think a lot of times when we talk about social finance, and also as Sooinn said, even though for impact investors, there is still a tendency to stick to the term sheet that they already know. And I totally resonate with that. And that's also, just to share one of the experience in our own fundraising experience, is that, well, actually, one of the investment terms that we're using is a variation of safe notes, which is very commonly used in traditional venture capital world, so to speak. But then in our particular investment round, how much we return in terms of the loan payment is tied to our impact KPIs. And one of our impact KPI being that, well, how many other players are we supporting to learn how to deploy more effective impact financing instruments? Just sharing this here that, yes, we would like to embed impact in financing instruments, and there are also easier ways that kind of meet the others in the middle, and stick to the traditional financial terms, and yet still with the possibility to enhance the impact element in there. Speaking of impact, before I actually wanted to talk about a topic that we didn't get to highlight a lot, which is impact measurement and management. So Sooinn, again, back to you. I'm quite curious how the impact measurement and management process has evolved as Enuma grow. And also I'm curious how the conversation is when it comes to impact measurement when you talk to different types of funders.
Shortly. In our case, we are very lucky because through the XPRIZE and with all those deployment in the field, we have a quite good impact metric ourselves. It's a learning gain. So we have a very strong learning gain through the XPRIZE, and whenever we deploy it in what country, in what environment, we continuously and consistently create quite good amount of learning gain, and we can say, hey, this is how we create the impact. If they spend the money and decide to use the digital devices in their environment, we actually deliver the outcome. However, in the case of grant fund, usually they are more about the short-term number, like number of recipients, right? Or the hour children actually spend on the devices. Or the number of download. So that is actually not very, how can I say, relate with the healthiness of the company or our growth potential. Our impact investors, most of our impact investors and our financial investors are focusing on just the business metrics like the revenue and number of real paying user, and our strategy to grow into the hockey stick course on the way. I believe that those are all very balanced. It's because we have very lucky type of social businesses that can prove it as a learning gain with some of the very solid number. But nowadays, the issue in the world is actually moving very fast to the new technology, right? So some of the metric we know so far, and some of the idea we run as a playbook is changing very rapidly. And I believe that impact investors and grant funders and us, a technology company, are all together to figure out what is going on and how we can still create the largest impact.
What I'm hearing is there is a lot of room for listening to co-create the impact indicators that tends to be staying on the outcome level, so it's not overly distracting as you move into different directions. Wonderful. So at this stage, actually, I would like to get back to our panelists. to summarize a little bit for our audience, what would be the one take-home message that you would like to reinforce for our audience to go take home with about social finance? Professor Azmi, would you like to kick us off?
Okay, thank you very much. My takeaway is this. I mean, the Islamic social finance, as I mentioned earlier on, zakat, sadaqah, wakaf, those Kato Hasan, those are seen to be religious instruments. I think what we need to do is to make it as economic instruments, financial instruments, and use those instruments to address issues like the activities that are done by the social enterprises. So the work needs to be done, and this is already starting in Malaysia, converting it to an economic instruments, and those to address all those needs. But bear in mind, governance is very important, because we do know that in Malaysia, many organizations that are using zakat fail to have proper governance. So bringing to the economic instruments, economic sphere, proper governance with proper regulation. That would be a powerful instrument to address those issues that are raised today in this forum. That's it.
Sooinn?
For me, when I first started this work, some VC actually think venture-backed social enterprise is oxymoron. They think it doesn't make sense. So they advise me to just earn money as much as possible and build a non-profit and give this money away as a philanthropy. Or some people was a bit upset because we asked grant, but as a form of for-profit company, right? However, and slowly I realized it's more teamwork. I also didn't know how I can run a tech company that require all those stock options and high growth and ROI with this technology can stay as a social enterprise. But some new terms coined and new investors just joined to the community, and the community actually raise us and sometimes guide us where to go. So I think that especially if you are just still dealing with to figure out what category this social enterprise is and how this company will ever exit, or how we can actually build a community surrounding those new type of social enterprise, we will all explore together as a community. It's a teamwork, and believe in the future. Don't try to judge it right away.
Fantastic message. And Yoshi, would you like to wrap this up for us?
Yes, I think the same thing can be said for funders, right? So there's not, so the funding is not the only thing, right? But as a funder, there's a lot of things you can do or you have to do. I think I've heard a word of systemic change in a lot of panels, right? There's a word in the impact investing space, investors' contribution, which means basically as an investor, you can not only just fund the companies or ventures, but there's also a lot of things you can do. Advocacy, you can do, engaging in the community, you can collaborate with other countries, because you're funders. I think it can be said also for philanthropists or foundations, right? Because you're funders, you're foundations, there's so much you can do. That's as the title is laying the groundwork for social finance. Before the finance, there's a lot of things, and there's, you can do so many. I think, and then also because we're in Asia, and I'm living in Asia, we have a lot in common. And as you said, collaboration. Across Asia, I think there's a reason to unite. We can do collaboration, we can do the groundwork, and in the end, we can do scaling the social finance. So that's my takeaway.
Thank you very much. And I know that we're at time, so thank you very much, dear panelists. Thank you for sharing your different and very valuable perspective.
Thank you so much, Ms. Maxime, and to all our